Welcome to this episode of the RLM podcast. I'm your host, Eli, and joining me is my co host, Jalea.
Hey guys.
And today we have a guest starring along with us. He is the head principal for the Hempfield High School, Dr. Brossman, and I have invited him into the studio today so we can kind of go over to some of his career challenges, his responsibilities as a principal. And yeah, just we're going to be talking about that sort of stuff. So, Dr. Brossman, feel free to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Bill Brossman. I've been working here at Hempfield High School for the past 20 years. This is my second full year as the head principal. And prior to that, I was a grade level principal working with grade 11.
Nice. So, obviously, I said we're kind of want to go over. Not too many people, I would say, know a whole lot about you as outside of a school, outside of a school basis. So, just kind of lead us through how you got to this position of being the head principal of the high school.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a long journey. But, I went to high school in the county. I went to Ephrata High School. And while at Ephrata, I played football, and I was a pretty good academic student in high school. Knew I wanted to go to college, and I was always drawn to science. Science was kind of my thing, and I had an amazing chemistry teacher in high school, and he influenced a lot of folks. And so I kind of focused more on chemistry, and I had this football thing. And when I was in school, one of the things that I enjoyed was giving presentations and teaching people things. And so it all kind of came together for me that if I went to college, I could play football, I could earn a teaching degree, and then the idea was I could get a job as a teacher and coach football and get to do the things that I was doing in high school for, like the rest of my life. So that was the plan. And I picked chemistry because it was a science, and it also, for those of you taking chemistry, it's not the easiest science, and so I like helping people. I'm not saying chemistry didn't always come the easiest to me. I had to work at it a little bit too, but I knew if I got a chemistry teaching certificate that there'd be a lot of jobs available.
Right.
Because there aren't a lot of chemists, like, especially today, but even back then, it wasn't like hundreds of people applying for the same job. There was a dozen or a handful of people applying. So I felt like it fit for me. And so that's what led me down the path of chemistry. And then so I went to college at Towson University in Maryland, played football 4 years, had a good time. We weren't winning championships, but we had winning records, and it was a great college experience. But coming out of that, I was able to be, in that fortunate boat where it's my senior year of college and doing interviews that spring, and I was able to secure a teaching position before I graduated, which was great. So I graduated from Towson knowing I'd be coming to Hempfield. Even though I went to high school in the county and had been to Hempfield for like soccer games and basketball games and different things, I didn't know a ton about it. But I came here, and one of the first people I met someone being interviewed and asking about the mill, one of the first people I met was Mrs. Thompson.
Oh, nice.
The chemistry teacher.
And I walked in her classroom, and even back then, 20 years ago, I went in her classroom, and the science supervisor was walking me around. And he's like, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "She talks so fast." And anyone who's had Mrs. Thompson knows that, yes, she talks fast, and she had all this energy, and it was really cool. So, so I got to start teaching chemistry here in the fall of 2004. 2005 was the spring, so 04, 05, and I did that here for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And I taught, I started on a cart, so I was a floating teacher, because we used to, when I started here at Hempfield, the high school had 2,400 kids, which is a little bit more than what we have now, and we also had, we didn't have senior option. We didn't have school to work doing like everyone was here all day, every day, and we weren't on block schedule. We
Yeah,
were
you had all eight
Oh.
periods.
It was actually a 9-period day.
9 classes in
Wow.
one day.
Yep. So students would have 8 classes because actually students one class was a lunch, and like every day I think someone had a study hall. So I think students had 7. Teachers taught 6, a lunch, a prep, and a duty, which was study hall. So yeah, so that's how it was when I started here. And I'm not gonna lie, it was a rat race, not just for teachers, but for kids too.
Right.
And so that's a big part of what led us from going from that schedule to the block, because people just said it's too much. It was too much for kids. It was too much for teachers, all in one day. Now you had the class for the whole year,
Right.
versus what we have now, half the year. But yeah, that was one way it started. And my first year teaching chemistry, I had Frau Richter was a student in my classes,
Nice.
Wow.
and a couple others that I've had over the years that are employees in the district now. But yeah, so yeah, I did that for 10 years, and I had a chance to Dr. Reinhardt, who just retired. Gosh, that's going to be 2 years ago now. He used to be our 12th grade principal. He took a sabbatical to work on his doctorate, and so they did a long-term substitute offering for a principal. And at the time, I had completed my principal certificate, and so I applied for and got the long-term sub role to fill in for Dr. Reinhardt, and had a great semester doing that. Wasn't sure if I was ready to leave the classroom, and so when that semester ended, and that was the spring of 2013, when that semester ended, I went back to teaching in the fall. And with regards to my teaching, when I taught, I was in what's now Mr. Nachisti's room. 232
Oh, nice.
was my room. And so I had one last semester, and then Dr. Axe, who used to be here, he was the 9th grade principal, he left for Warwick, and he's now the superintendent at Manheim Central School District. But that's who I replaced, and I, at that time, took over as the 11th grade principal. And then I stayed in that role until 2 years ago, when there was some more movement, and then I was able to step into the high school role. I feel like I've been rambling for a while.
Oh, you're good. You're
You're
good.
Are there more questions? Like, do you
Yeah.
have questions as
So,
we go, or
Obviously, obviously you led us through. Was there any time that you were severely like unsure of where you might eventually like you knew what you wanted to be, but there were things that happened, challenges that you faced that you weren't exactly sure where you might actually end up?
Absolutely. So life's a journey.
Right.
And, one piece of advice I would give anybody is try to keep as many doors and options open to you as long as possible. So I got my teaching cert. I started teaching chemistry. And then when I wanted to get my master's degree, I was like, well, I could see myself being a principal. So I got my master's in educational leadership, and I got my principal cert. I did the internships. I did all the service hours, all the things you need to get that. But at the same time, at the very beginning of this thing, when I started talking, like, I thought I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to be a coach, and I coached football here at Hempfield with Coach Zieber, who was the coach before Coach Eger, and then there were some other coaches too. But so I was coaching football here, and so this idea of I didn't know where things were going to lead me, but I always wanted to give myself options. So I could have stayed and kept coaching. I was really into, with the coaching, I was doing a lot of the strength training stuff and the team building stuff in the weight room in the off season to try to make sure we were in the best position possible. And I really liked that. I enjoyed that. I was a big weight room guy as a football player. So I enjoyed that. But sometimes you get called to other things, and there are other opportunities. And so because I had my principal cert, I was able to explore it. Now, because I got to do that long-term sub, that's what really made it like, okay, this is something that I enjoy. So it was really nice in that I didn't have to make that huge leap of faith of like, okay, I'm just going to quit teaching and try something completely new. I was able to, try it before you buy it kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah. Have the experience before you're fully
Yeah.
put into that role. Now, I don't know. I know as myself as a kid, there were I thought of every possible thing I could become, and I would say every time I was like, "Oh, this is exactly what I'm going to be," and a week later, it's changed. Was there anything? Um, Obviously, you had told me that you had wanted to be an astronaut as a kid. Was there anything else that you were kind of like looking at that you were like, I could really, like you maybe even had the opportunity to do that and you turned it down in hopes that you would, land in this position?
Sure. So you're right. As I shared with you earlier today, I thought about being an astronaut as a kid, and it was actually space camp that made me realize I couldn't be an astronaut because you, uh, at least at the time, it's probably still the same, but the space suits, you can only be up to 6 feet tall.
That's
And I
interesting.
wasn't over 6 feet in seventh grade, but I was well on my way to getting there.
Right.
And so I thought, oh, I might be a little too big to be an astronaut. Um, and so space camp was awesome. Maybe a little crushed my dream. But no, sorry, where were we going with that? You asked,
Like what
oh,
other careers did you look at that,
right. So when it came time to pick a college, I was looking at a bunch of different schools, and I kind of wanted to play at the biggest place where I could still play. So
right.
I was able to land at a 1AA school, and I was looking at Lehigh, Lafayette, Bucknell, Towson, Delaware, Millersville. Millersville's D2, and all the PSAC schools, which are D2. And so there was in addition, my love for science also made me considering engineering, um, chemical engineering, that
Right.
type of thing. So I was really looking at Bucknell, um, to go to Bucknell, play football, maybe do chemical engineering as well.
I know.
Uh, but as fate would have it, that didn't really work out for football. And so in going to Towson, Towson had a fine science program. They weren't quite known for engineering like a Bucknell or Lehigh or Lafayette.
Right.
They're known, like Towson is kind of like the Millersville of Maryland. Like it was established as a state teaching college and then grew into a university from there. So I guess my plan changed based on where I ended up going, which maybe that's
Right.
not the best way to pick a college is through your sport.
Yeah.
Um, but I always had teaching in the back of my head, not in the back of my, it was in the front of my head. But that was one thing that kind of shaped my direction a little bit. If I had gone to Bucknell, I doubt I would have majored in education. I probably would have pursued the engineering because that was kind of something they were really known for.
Right.
Towson, I could have pursued engineering, but by that time I had kind of made up my mind that, till you commit and then till you actually get there, there's a big chunk of time. And a lot of people start their college experience as an undecided major, but I tried to be as decided as I could, to be as planful as I could. And that's what led me to settle on education. Everything kind of came together
Right.
with,
Right.
I want to teach, I want to coach. I'm going to a school that specializes is known for teaching. It just seemed like everything aligned. And I know that doesn't happen for everyone. Some people, drift
Right.
a little
Some
bit.
people go their whole life expecting to become one thing, and then they end
Right.
up in an entirely different position, which I think is kind of fun and unique.
Mhm.
Now, were there? Obviously, you said you wanted to be an astronaut as a kid. Was football ever? Was that like a just something that you wanted to do? Was that something you wanted to turn into potentially a career, or what was the? Or was it just like a sport that you enjoyed to do?
So the sport I was pretty good at, but I was self-aware enough that I played lineman in high school, and then I played line in college as well. But at 6'1", 6'2", 250 pounds, I was realistic in that wasn't big enough for the NFL,
Mm.
or that type of thing. And you see those guys, and
Right.
and well, as the speaker said, they're like 6'8", 6'9", 300 something. Yeah, so that just wasn't in the genetic cards for me.
Right.
And even going from playing in the Lancaster Leadman League, where I felt like I was one of the bigger guys out there on the football field, especially back then, to going to a school like Towson, I was like the smallest lineman.
Really?
Yeah, and it was an eye-opening experience when it's like, hey, we're gonna let's go to the store, and you're gonna get in a car, and I'm like, okay. They say, okay, you sit in the middle because you're the smallest. I'm like, oh, I'm the smallest. Yeah,
6'2", you're the
yeah,
smallest.
okay. Well, I guess I'll go in the middle. Yeah. So but that's one of the great things about getting out of the area you grow up
Right,
in and
right.
getting out of your comfort zone.
Experience a whole new
Yeah.
group of people.
That's right.
Whole new dynamic.
Yeah.
That's funny. I don't. Everyone. I've always played around in my head with the idea of playing football, but it never. Every time I looked at it, I was just like, it is something that I would rather. I think I would enjoy more if I just watched it and never had to play it. It's just. It does not seem like a fun sport for me. I don't know. I'm more of a soccer guy myself.
I mean, it's certainly a lot of work and a lot of physicality. And someone said something to me long after I was done playing football, but they talked about how much you put in versus how much you actually get to play.
Right.
And and they were right. There's not.
It's not a 1-to-1 ratio.
No, it's not. It's very inefficient in the amount of work that you put in versus the games that you actually get to play. But for me, it was the quality of that experience and getting to do something that you don't get to do really anywhere else. And when I say that, I mean, like, hitting people and knocking them down,
Right.
like that all being allowed and sanctioned. Like, it's not something you're really supposed to do other places. So,
Right.
so that's what made it worth it to me.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I've never really been like, I could say I'm an athlete, but I don't really do sports. I do track and cross country, but I never really would call myself an athlete just because I never put myself into that lifestyle of constant practice and all that stuff. It just, no, wasn't for me, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, track, and they're certainly athletes.
Right.
It's just a different type of
Yeah.
competition.
Yeah. I could I could never be running on track in the middle of winter. in the snow.
That is just kind of crazy.
I could not do that. Oh, I'd freeze so quickly.
So I can certainly say that football has shaped my life also in that, and this is nothing about other sports, but football has, in my opinion, always kind of been the ultimate team sport.
Mm-hmm.
In that, you set up a play, everyone has to be ready, the ball is hiked, and then everyone has to do their job to have success.
Right.
And like, you really all have to come together. And it's also very unique in that you've got big guys, you got little guys, you got tall guys, you got short guys. Like it's a very diverse group of people coming together to accomplish a goal, and everyone has to play their part for the thing to move to move the ball forward. And putting the team before yourself. There's just a lot of analogies in there for leadership that have bled over into what I do now, in terms of building teams, trying to get a team to have a goal and getting everyone to do their part in reaching that goal.
Yeah,
so it's worked out really well for me, and I see now, having the benefit of being able to look back how that helped shape me for what I would eventually go on to do.
Right. And maybe I'm just more of a soccer person because I don't like the idea of having a 250-pound person flying at me.
Yeah.
I'd rather just stay in the comfort of just having the ball down in the feet. I'm okay with that. I kind of want to talk about obviously as a, obviously you were a teacher, then you were a principal. What was kind of the major jump of responsibility that you faced? Because, I would think that being a principal, being a teacher are similar in the fact that you do have you're in charge of a group of individuals and you're doing your best to teach them certain values or skills or whatever. So what was kind of like the major difference in that jump?
Sure. So most people that go into education go in because they want to help others and they want to impact others and help them be better in their lives, right? And if you talk to many administrators, when you change from, part of the reason to want to go from being in the classroom to being an administrator is, as a classroom teacher, especially a chemistry teacher, I might have 70 kids a semester, 140 kids a year. So it really comes down to how what size of impact can you have?
Right.
So as a classroom teacher, you can have a great impact on the kids
Sure.
that are in front of you. That's what you're working with.
Right.
And that's awesome for those
Mm-hmm.
kids. When you step into the administrative role, so our grade level principals, you know, they're working with 550 kids. Now, when I
Right.
say working with, we all know that they're not
Right.
working
Right.
individually with
It's
those
not
kids.
constant. Yeah.
But the decisions that they're making, the procedures they're putting in place, the things that they're doing to set up those 550 kids that they're responsible for
Right.
for success. So it's not, and it's a different kind of impact. And so that's a struggle when you go from being a classroom teacher to being an administrator. Like
Right.
the classroom teacher, it's a much closer relationship. You really know, you know your kids by name, you
Right,
know
right,
their,
right.
you know their interest, I don't get myself as administrators, I don't get to have that close relationship with the kids, but I get to see the benefits on a larger
Right.
scale.
Right.
So that's a big jump. And then the responsibility as well. So being responsible for so many more people and making decisions and working with them to guide things so that everyone gets the results that they're
Right.
trying to get within our system.
Right. Because I would say as a teacher, you almost have more. You can more closely. Control might not be the right word, but you can more closely influence what the kids are directly doing. And as a principal, the most you can do is tell the teachers, "Hey, this is what we need them to be doing." But it
Yeah.
doesn't always get right back down to the
Sure.
students.
It's breadth versus depth.
Right.
So
Right.
teachers can go deeper, but administrators it's a little wider.
Right. Right. What would you say was the most challenging thing you ever faced as a teacher? Just, I mean, obviously chemistry is I would say it's a harder course to teach because it's a lot more knowledge and a lot more, you have to, I don't know. Maybe I'm not.
Hardest thing as a teacher. Just give me a second. This isn't unique to chemistry. Many, trying to help students understand. Everyone wants to know, how's this going to help me? Like,
Right.
why do I need to know this? Why do I need to learn this chemistry? Trying to help students understand that learning chemistry isn't so much about learning the chemistry.
Right.
It's about the thought process. It's about the way a way of looking at the world differently. And for chemistry, it's a more ordered way. I mean, in chemistry, like every atom matters, right? Like we're literally
Right.
counting atoms. So there's a detailness to it. And trying to help students, one of the big challenges was getting kids to recognize, yes, we're learning chemistry, but I'm trying to teach you a way of thinking.
Right.
And so I would try to pull out examples. I mean, if you look at many of the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, a lot of them have some sort of science or engineering background. They didn't all go to school for business. But the reason that there's a correlation there is because when you go to college and you study something, you're not just studying that subject. You're learning a different way of thinking.
Right. Right.
And so, if I could tell our students when you go to continue your education, it's not just about the subject; it's about learning a way of thinking. And so that was a big challenge in
Right.
teaching chemistry.
So it's almost like even though someone goes to college because they want to specifically major in I don't know a specific type of chemistry, they come out of college, they know that chemistry, right? They're specialized for that, but they're also specialized for that process or that concept of thinking where they have to be given a equation or a set of materials and they have to be able to think, what can I do with this? What can I create? What can I turn this into? What was this before this happened to it? So
Yeah.
it's almost just like, I mean, it prepares you for later in life because not necessarily with chemistry, but whenever you have to make a big decision and you may just be given materials or you're just given a situation, you have to figure what am I supposed to do with all this?
Yeah.
And it, yeah,
especially with the advent that as more and more AI comes out, it's going to be less and less
right,
knowing the stuff and more how do we think about it.
right,
Um,
right,
the best man for my wedding, he went to Penn State, majored in chemical engineering, and so he did 5 years at Penn State, came out, wonderful chemical engineering degree, went and worked for GlaxoSmithKline. That's a drug company. They make medicines. And now he's still working for GSK, but he's in charge of a whole product. Like
right.
he does zero chemical engineering. I talked to him about
Hmm.
that. He's like, I haven't done chemical engineering in a long time. He's in charge of creating a product.
Right.
He's in charge of that drug line, the line for creating whatever
For that
product,
specific,
whatever
right.
product the company tells him But so he doesn't do the chemical engineering, but he needed that background knowledge to know how to direct other people
Right,
to make
right.
the.
Because if you don't know the subject itself, you can't really tell other people whether they're doing their job right or wrong.
Right.
Right. Now, as a principal, obviously you went from being 11th grade principal to being head principal. What would you say is your biggest? Yeah, let's just say, what's your biggest pet peeve as a principal that you faced, where you're just like, you wish you could do something just to make that change?
Biggest pet peeve. Gosh. So at our most recent assembly, I tried to touch on some of the things, which is, I shared the message of, if you want to be successful, be where you're supposed to be,
Right.
when you're supposed to be there,
Right.
doing
Yeah.
what you're supposed to be doing, that type of thing. So I guess a pet peeve would just be like, we're all here for a purpose, and we know what that purpose is.
Yeah.
So a pet peeve would be when people aren't going along with that program.
Yeah.
Like we're all here for a reason. We're all here trying to get better. We're trying to go to our classes, earn our grades, get exposed to different. I mean, we're a comprehensive high school. We've got everything. We got all the
Right.
subjects. You're not
Right.
just here for math, science, and social studies and English, right? Like we've got so many electives to explore because you don't know what you don't know until you've tried it. Like if
Right. Yeah.
you've never taken an art class, you don't know if you like art or if you can do art.
Yeah.
Like so we're all here to participate in this comprehensive education, get exposed to a bunch of things, figure out, what we're good at, what we like, what we don't like, what's going to be our path when we leave here. And so I just want people to do that
Right.
rather than.
Yeah.
So my pet peeve is when people are doing things that aren't going along with that.
Right. Yeah.
Now that being said, I understand. I was a high schooler. I understand there's the social component to high school and all that, but we can be social without
Yeah.
doing all the nefarious things that
Yeah.
aren't on
Right. Not necessary.
aren't
at all.
on mission, right?
No. Yeah.
So
I
that's
don't.
one of my pet peeves.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Honestly, like, I'm almost thinking, is there, I don't know, what would you say is like the one trait that you have that you think makes you, that when when you saw yourself as a principal or wanting to be a principal or an administrator or a teacher, that you were like, this quality of me makes me best suited for that purpose?
It's a great question. So I've had the ability in the past couple years to help hire principals. And when someone asks, like, what's something you're looking for in a principal? And this would be something I've learned in myself. Is that ability to basically own a mistake? Because the reality is, as principals, we're asked to make, I don't know, make up a number, a couple hundred decisions a day, right?
Yeah.
So the likelihood that you're going to get all of those decisions correct
Right.
every day
Right.
is pretty low. So my ability to acknowledge when a mistake was made or something could have been done better, the ability to be humble enough to apologize to the person if somebody was wronged or own that mistake and then find a way to move forward and improve upon it.
Right.
So that's one thing that I've tried to employ, and it's certainly something I look for in people that want to get into this.
Yeah.
People that I'm looking to hire. If somebody talks to me and say they want to be a principal, I try to make sure they understand, like, you're gonna have to be okay with eating some crow,
Right.
because you're not gonna get it right every time.
Yeah.
But that's not just a principal thing. I mean, that's a everyone thing, right? We can't get everything right all the time, but how we respond to that
Right.
and move forward. I mean, sometimes you got to suck up your pride and just say, I was wrong, okay, and own that. And then, but then the next step is, how do we make it better?
Right. Right. I guess, it's like you can't go into a situation where you're in charge of anything really and think you're going to be perfect at it. But once you fail, you say, yeah, I failed, but don't stay in that state of, I
Yeah.
failed for too long, or nothing's going to ever get better. You got to be like, yeah, I failed. All right, let's figure out how to get this back on track.
So, I mean, Hempfield High School, I mean, we're not perfect.
Right.
We got our issues, we got our flaws. I'm not going to tell anybody we're perfect. We're working on it. I feel like we're working on all the things,
Right.
all of our issues to the best of our ability. Are we going to get it right every time? No. But we're going to keep trying, and we're just trying to make this the best place we can.
Right. Yeah. Julie, you have anything?
Not
you wanna
currently. I
ask?
do want to build on that topic. Like, I feel like when you do something wrong or someone else does something wrong and they apologize and they change, it kind of builds character, and you can kind of forgive them and be like, wow, they're trying to change. But
Right.
then if you just apologize and you just keep doing the same actions, it just looks like it's making their actions okay.
Right.
And they don't have to accept any responsibility on their
Right.
behalf.
Because if they're willing to just keep doing it, it's almost like they've justified that action on some level. For some reason, they think that action is justified, so they think the apology is enough, and then they can just keep doing it, which doesn't really work in the way of the world.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to earn any credibility that way.
Right. Yeah. I can definitely say I was not always the type to take any responsibility. I was definitely the type to either pin the blame on someone else, or just be like, well, or something else be like, something something that couldn't possibly do anything about it. It's just like, oh, well, this didn't happen, so I can do this, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, really, in reality, no, I just was lazy, or I didn't feel like doing it, or I looked at it, fully saw that I did it wrong, and just did not care to change it. But I've definitely have worked my best to realize when I do something, I'm like, that is not correct. I did that wrong. I'll fix it as much as possible.
Yeah. And that's all we can do, right? We
Right.
recognize a mistake and work to fix it. I had a situation this past fall. We're dealing with something here at the high school, and I'll be honest, I kind of thought, well, it wasn't my problem.
Right.
I thought this other person screwed up, and it's not my problem. And had a conversation with another leader above me, and they said to me, well, what did you do about it? What corrective action did you take?
Right.
And I was like, oh, I didn't even think that was me. But, I'm the head principal now.
Right.
So if it's basically anywhere in this building, around this building, connected to this
Right.
building, ultimately that comes back to me. So
Right.
that's been humbling and eye-opening.
Right.
To you asked about being a principal and the responsibilities. So I've actually been reading a book called Extreme Ownership: How Navy SEALs Fight and Win.
Jocko Willink?
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's a lot of good stuff in there.
Yeah.
Some good takeaways. It's made me reflect on some things.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It can be humbling.
Yeah. My dad listens to the Jocko podcast all the time.
Oh, okay.
So he reads all the books,
Okay.
listens to all the podcasts. So Jocko Willink gets fresh in my memory.
Okay. Yeah, as I told you, I'm not a podcast guy, so this is all new to me. But
Yeah.
maybe I'll have to check that out. I didn't know there was one.
Yeah, and like as last thing I want to say is absolutely, it's the most important. I think in what I see as the most important part of being the leader is knowing that you can't not take responsibility for every action someone in your I don't know what to call it. I don't know what you call it. In someone that you're in charge of does. You cannot take ownership for every single action they do, but when the action affects a larger system or the whole system, that's when you need to step in and say, "Hey, let's figure out what we did wrong. Let's figure out how to change it." You know, I think it's important not to take all the blame for everything. Realize that some things are things that you cannot control, but also realize that you can put parameters in place so that these things are less likely to happen. And when they do, you can figure out where the fault was and figure out how to change it. So I think that's the most important part of being a leader.
It is, and you have to, but you have to be willing to have those hard
Right.
conversations.
Right. Yeah.
But if you build the integrity, like you were talking about, people are more willing to engage in those hard
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah. Absolutely. Very. Yeah. Always important. Well, thank you for coming onto this podcast and agreeing to this. I hope that anyone who's listening, I hope that you can take one or a couple messages from this. Try my best to, when I invite people on the podcast, I make sure that I, kind of think about 'em, like who would be the best fit, and I thought that you would be a great fit. You have a lot of responsibility in this high school. Obviously, 2,300 kids or something like that. That's a big responsibility, even though it's not direct with every single one of us. It's still a powerful impact, no matter who's in that position. I think you do that position very well. I think you're a good principal, so absolutely, congratulations. Keep doing what you're doing.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, and
Absolutely.
thank you for making my first podcast experience a good one.
All right, and thank you everyone for listening. We hope you all have a great day. You can find this podcast on Spotify, YouTube. There's also plenty of other podcast platforms that we are on. We thank you for listening, and we wish you all the very best.